Leandria wondered whether Cameo was programmed not to crave drink. Don't or can't? It was a question she'd never dared ask before. It was distasteful to inquire about a person's modifications. But she was already a little bent, and the question slipped out. I can if I want to, Cameo snipped defensively. Prove it. Andromeda pushed the drink toward Cameo, a malicious grin spreading across her face. Picking up her glass, Cameo wrinkled her nose again and took a small sip. She immediately gagged, almost throwing up. Can't, Andromeda confirmed. See, said Hallen. You let those flesh heads mess with your mind too much. You've no free will. I've so free will, Cameo's voice quavered. It's only the things that are bad for us, right, Andy? Don't look at me, Andromeda scoffed. My parents only took stuff like getting fat. ReInception is supposed to help us, not spoil all the fun. She sipped her drink. Funny, you can't have things because your parents modded it out of you. Leah can't have things because she refuses the cure. Somehow, at opposite ends of the spectrum, you've met in the middle. Leandria looked up, her eyes meeting Cameo's. She suddenly felt terrible because Cameo clearly wanted the drink. She wondered how parents could make those choices for their children, and whether it made Cameo feel less loved that she hadn't been enough the way she was. Right. Leandria held Cameo's gaze. Hilarious. For so long, Leandria had wanted life to be a little easier, and for people not to look at her as a curiosity. Often, she'd felt she had more in common with the prole than with all the modified, model-perfect kids around her who never wiggled in their seats or blurted things out in class, and always got their homework done on time. She'd begrudged her parents for making her an outsider. But now, it made her feel profoundly loved that her parents hadn't wanted to change her. Then again, maybe in Cameo's mind, Leandria's parents didn't care enough to modify her. Beliefs were a complicated thing. She considered the variations at their table. Hallen's parents had picked and chosen, putting in consent protocols and academic modifications. When he was small, he'd gotten an attention mod. There had also been one that had something to do with his eating habits and athletics that he was not so clear about. But they allowed him to drink, and he could have premarital sex, so long as his partner passed the consent gauntlet. And the consent protocols were not ReInception. They were an optional comm program, not a mind modification. Technically, you could ignore them, if you could enjoy the moment while both your comms were blaring in your ears, buzzing on your arms, and recording everything you were doing. Cameo's parents had wanted a firmer grip on their daughter. They'd made alcohol unpalatable to her. They'd taken away her sexual desire until she was married. There were, Leandria presumed, extensive academic and behavioral mods, too. Andromeda was the hardest to figure out. One would imagine she'd be the most altered of the group, her father being who he was. She was a decent but not excellent student, so it was unclear what her academic mods were. She seemed to eat what she wanted, yet maintain a perfect figure, so maybe she had eating mods. But Andy could also afford any physical mod she wanted, so restraining her eating might not have been how she kept her figure. She was allowed to drink, and she was one of the most sexually adventurous people Leandria knew. She had no consent mods, no gender preference. ReInception held most people back from something, but Andromeda seemed freed by it. Like, if she shouldn't do it, surely her parents would have programmed it out of her. And if she could, it must be okay. Cameo continued to look at Leandria. Well, now that you're 20, you must be thinking about some mods yourself. Of course she's not, Hallen answered for her. Andromeda crossed her arms over her chest. Shut it, Hallen. She gets to decide, not her parents, and certainly not you. You're not the one who had to do the hard work all these years.